tours, I recommend do not go over there and win souls for Jesus. Okay? My approach with the Orthodox is this. I want to convince them to return to the Torah first. Because most Orthodox, what's the matter with me tonight? I need some coffee. Most Orthodox are living according to the Talmud. They're living according to all the biblical commentaries, just like most Christians. Not what the Bible says, okay? See, I'm not confident that Yeshua is in the Talmud, but I'm confident he's in the Torah. And if I can talk to them about returning, see, that's what's going to irritate them. That's what's going to get them jealous. They're not going to get jealous. Remember, we're supposed to provoke them to jealousy, Romans chapter 11? They're not going to be provoked to jealousy by us over there telling them about how they crucified Christ on the cross and you got to win yourselves for Jesus and blah, blah, blah. They're going to be provoked to jealousy when they see you doing something that they know they're supposed to be doing, whether they know it consciously or unconsciously. If you're keeping the Sabbath, not doing Jewish things, but if you're keeping the biblical things, unconsciously they know, wait, that's only for us. And so what does that provoke? Jealousy, just like someone was with their wife. That's my wife, you know? They're doing the same thing. That's my Torah. That's for us only. So it provokes them to jealousy. The letter of the Torah, halakha. The spirit of the Torah is agadah, but it's not choose one or the other. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 3 in a nutshell, which most Western theologians interpret as Paul got rid of this and replaced it with that. That's never gone away. That's been there from the very beginning. And neither has this. It's this before that. If you're just doing that, you're going to get cursed. Okay? Because you don't have the relationship. It's just like your regular body and spirit. We'll do other examples of this as well. I'm going to comment on 2 Corinthians chapter 3 in just a moment. Brain versus the conscience. Another excellent example. From a halakhic point of view, would be represented by the brain. The brain's something you can see, the gray matter in your head. Brain surgeons know a lot about the gray matter in your head. They figured out a lot of things. But most of them will tell you we still have no idea how to define what this is. The conscience. They still have trouble defining and understanding what makes someone long. Where does longing come from? Where does mourning come from? Where does puppy love? Remember that puppy love feeling when you're 8th grade and you're writing notes back and forth and lying about everything? Where does puppy love come forth from? Okay? They still have no idea. The reality is, it's not choose the brain or choose the conscience. If you have a conscience but you don't have a brain, you're unable to express all the unseen things in your case. You don't have any way to express it. If you have a brain but you don't have a conscience, well, then you run for senator or congressman, president, something. But it's just another example of all these things. Greek thinking, Western thinking always forces us to choose between the two. It's got to be one or the other. No, it's one before the other. And they only work effectively, just like man and woman, when they're together as one. Then they're an effective representation of the Creator of the universe when they're walking together in unity as one. Not choose one or the other, but walking effectively. Now, the fruit versus the seed is another example. The fruit is what you can see. The seed is what you can't see. It's underneath the ground. But if you don't plant that, you're going to be cursed trying to produce that. I guarantee you. If you don't have a seed, it's going to be a frustrating life trying to produce fruit without a seed. So the seed's got to go first. That's represented in the testimony of Yeshua. When you get to the book of Revelation, those who are the remnant of his seed are what? Those who have the testimony of Yeshua and keep the commandments. Is it pick one or the other? Is the remnant of his seed one or the other? I said it once again. I go to the Orthodox. I go to Israel. And I'm talking to the guys about the Torah. I'm talking to them, and I'll mention Yeshua, and I'll mention the Messiah, because they'll always ask about it. And at the end of every conversation, it always ends something like this. You know, you need to choose between the Torah and this Yeshua character. And then when I come home and I go down to Florida and I'm talking to my Christian friends after we get done talking, you know what they say to me? You know, you need to choose between the Torah and this Yeshua character. They're saying the same things that the Orthodox are saying, okay? Because they've all been taught, especially in Israel, they've been influenced, okay, by their captivity. Okay, under Alexander the Great, it's passed down from one generation to the next. That's why they call them Hellenists and so forth, because they've been Greekized. just like the rest of the world. If you don't believe me, land in Tel Aviv one day and check out the town. Okay, anyway. Keep the commandments. These two need to be one in order to be one full testimony. It's not just testimony of Yeshua, but it's the keeping of the commandments. When you put them both together as one, now you have the truth being told. Very quickly, the difference between knowing about God is halakha. Knowing God is agadah. Knowing things about God are very important. When the commandments are scrawled on the stones, that's information that gives you insight about God. But that doesn't mean you know God just because you know lots of stuff about Him. But the reverse is true. If you say you know Him, but you don't know anything about Him, how does that work well in your relationship? Tell me, here's another reason for the guys to beat me up in the parking lot. If you say all the nice things, oh honey, I love you, I love you, know I love you, know I'm dedicated to you. If you do that once every 9 months or whatever, okay, kiss her and so forth, but you don't know nothing about her. You don't know what her favorite color is, you don't know what her favorite food is. You know how your wife's going to take that? You don't care. That's how they're going to take it, because they're designed to see it that way. You don't care. Because if you cared, you would know something about me. So now some guys right now are sitting there going, what is her favorite color? I know what you're thinking. But you understand what I'm saying. It's not pick one or the other. It's one before the other, or the two are designed to be one. Knowing about God is represented in the phrase acts. Knowing God is in His ways. Now let me jump forward here very quickly, because this is the last one we're going to do, but I'm going to jump to this one. Psalm 103, verse 7. He made known His ways, agadah, unto Moses, but His acts, halakha, unto the children of Israel. What is he saying there? He's saying that Moses, now most historians put a window of between 3 million and 6 million Hebrews wandering through the wilderness. Let's take the lower figure just for grins. Let's say there are 3 million Hebrews wandering through the wilderness. 3 million Israelites, only one knew God, panim el panim. Only one knew His ways. Only one had a relationship with Him, because panim el panim, translated as face to face, means intimacy. The only one of the 3 million Israelites that had intimacy and knew His ways was the only one God gave the Torah to. Not only that, but Moses is the only one called in the whole Bible, the only one said to know God face to face. There's a couple of examples where it seems to imply that they see God face to face, but He's the only one that says He knew Him face to face. And He's the one that knew His ways. Everybody else was just impressed with what He does. But Moses was the one that had that intimacy with God, and he's the only one He gave the Torah to. And how did He represent that when Moses came down the mountain with the tablets? It shone brightly in his face. Because Moses could see God face to face. Why? He had a relationship with the Creator, and he knew His ways, not just impressed with His acts. But see, the children of Israel had that opportunity, but they did the calf worship thing, if you remember. That whole thing in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 happened in Exodus chapter 34. In between the two sets of tablets, they did the calf worship thing, and they broke the very first commandment, the relationship commandment. You shall love the Lord, Him only. I'm your God. They broke that one. It's not the other 6. It's that one that they broke. So they severed their relationship with the Creator. And here comes Moses with this bright, shining light in his face. They could not bear to look upon it. Why? They forsook the relationship. If there's no relationship, you're going to die. So He covered His face with a veil. Until when? Until the relationship is restored. Now the veil can be removed. The veil is not the Torah. Funny thing about Paul. When Paul writes things like that, he assumes that you know the story of why he mentioned it. So when you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 3, it mentions Moses and the veil over his face. Guess what Paul assumes? That you know the story of Moses and the veil over his face. You know how many treatises on that? I've seen people don't even go back to Exodus chapter 4 and even bring that into the context. See there, the law's been done away with. Veil's been removed. Veil's over Moses' face. Law's been done away with. Or in Galatians chapter 4, in the allegory of Sarah and Hagar, Paul writes that assuming you know about the story of Sarah and Hagar. You know how many treatises I've read on that? We said, do we even mention They don't even go back to the story of Sarah and Hagar. Well, you know, Hagar is the Torah, Hagar is the law, and Sarah is the grace. Got to separate those two and get them out of there. When you read the story, it's faith versus no faith. Not Torah versus grace. Faith versus no faith. Read the story. I'm not yelling at you, don't get me wrong, okay? But read this. These people need to read the story of Sarah and Hagar to understand that Hagar is when Sarah and Abraham stepped out of faith. They didn't trust God and His promises. And as a result of that, it was chaos in their life. It produced Ishmael, the eternal enemy of Israel. That was what they did when they stepped out of faith. They went to Hagar. But when they returned to faith and trusted in God's promises, then they had a boy named Isaac, and in his seed shall you be called. So the whole story is the difference between trusting in God and not trusting in God. Because if you go to the mountain with no faith, you're going to die. Because Israel was not delivered from Egypt by the Torah. Israel was delivered from Egypt by the blood of the Lamb. What do you think would have happened if they said, well, let's just bag this Passover thing, and let's just run right on to Sinai? Why am I doing this in a southern accent? I can tell you why. It's because of Bill Cloud. Any opportunity I can have to make fun of Bill. Okay. You're going to tell me. Let's get back to this. I got a few more things to do. So once again, these things are constantly displayed before us. Moses was told in Exodus chapter 3, verse 12, that this is going to be the identity of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because I know you're going to go back to Egypt and there's all kinds of things called God. So this is going to distinguish me from all the other gods in the universe. And here it is. When I deliver you from Egypt, so you can serve me on the mountain. Now, did God say to choose between those two things? Well, either be delivered from Egypt or serve me on the mountain. You have to choose between two, like the orthodox person said and the one in Florida said to me. Or did he say, first I deliver you from Egypt, then I take you so you can serve me on the mountain? They were delivered by the blood of the Lamb. They were taken to the mountain to get the means necessary to survive the wilderness. Because if you keep the Torah, you are what? Blessed. If you keep the commandments of God, you are blessed. And He wants His people, especially in the wilderness. He already knew they were going to spend time in the wilderness. Moses already knew that because God already told him at the burning bush. You know, you're not going to go right straight to the promised land. You already knew that. You're going to have to serve me on the mountain first. Why? Because there I'm going to give you the instructions so you can what? Survive the wilderness. So they get out in the wilderness, they murmur and they complain, and they stop doing these things, and they perish in the wilderness. How many patterns how many things over and over and over do we have to have for us before we figure out what the problem is? But no. Okay, knowing about God, knowing God's ways. Very quickly, the difference between that which is fixed and intent. I'm going to skip some of these. The halakha is love your neighbor. Agadah is love your God. In other words, halakha is the things you can see. The commandments concerning loving your neighbor are things you do. You don't commit adultery. You don't steal from them. You don't covet all these kind of things. You pull their, the bull out of the ditch when it goes in the ditch. You put the bird back in the nest. So those are all things that you can see and so forth. Part of loving our neighbor is celebrating these feasts together. These are things that are demonstrated in the feast we observe and the days we gather together to worship Him on Shabbat. These are things that you can see demonstrated as love. We're not just there selfishly for ourselves. We're there to commune with the brethren and fellowship with the brethren and enjoy each other as well. And of course, love your God is the things you can't see. Those were expressed in the first 4 commandments. The last 6 commandments were halakhic commandments. The first 4 were agadic. Things you can't see. Relationship. Love the Lord your God. Don't make any images. Blah, blah, blah. The last 6 were all love your neighbors, which is revealed in deeds. So these are the things we say. Our relationship. These are the things that we do. But this comes before that. When he was questioned about what the greatest commandment is, he didn't say, well, choose between those two. He said, first love your God and then love your neighbor as yourself. He didn't choose one or the other. So what he's saying is when your word matches your deed, then you have truth. Otherwise, you're just flapping your face to me, dude. Okay? But when what you say is what you do, now I know there's truth involved. You got a lot of people running around just saying a lot of stuff and not doing very much. That's not displaying truth. And that's not expressing our God. outside of the cup versus the inside of the cup. This is very familiar. I promise I won't be over 15 minutes. When he was asked, when he confronts the Pharisees, now remember, when you read the word Pharisees in your Bible, don't read Jews. Read religious systems. Mm-hmm. That's what Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes are. They're not just saying, well, only Jews do this kind of stuff. Okay? All religious systems are guilty of these things. So just read, he speaks to the religious systems of the day, and he says, you tie the mint and cumin and anise. That's, guess what? Something you do. You can see the people come to the temple with their offerings of mint and cumin and anise. That was something demonstrated. It wasn't unseen. It was seen by everybody. And it's according to the Torah. But you omit the weightier matters of the Torah. And then he names 3 things you can't see. Justice, mercy, and faith. Those are 3 things you can't see. Yeshua making it very clear that the reason why you do one before the other is because one's more important than the other. The unseen things are more important than the seen. That is true. Just like in this building, the foundation is more important than all this other stuff. And as my friend Bill would say, I'd be willing to guess that when most of us walked in here, very few of us said, hey, what a great foundation this building has. Wow. We took it for granted, didn't we? We didn't even think about it. But the reality is, if it wasn't for that, this whole thing would collapse. There wouldn't be anything here. So the most important part of this whole building is not what you can see, it's what you can't see. That's why the Bible says if you want to produce fruit upward, you have to take root downward. That's why we call this Hebrew roots. Because the idea is I want to produce God's fruit in these latter days, because when the wheat produces the fruit, then you know the difference between the wheat and the tares, and the reapers can come and remove the tares. But as long as we're all looking the same, he says he's not going to send those reapers as long as we look like the tares. So there's going to be a group of people that are going to rise up, but in order to rise up and produce that fruit on the head of that wheat, they've got to what? Take root downward first. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. And so he says, so he didn't stop there, because if he had stopped there, we might have concluded that he's saying, hey, we don't have to tie the mint and cumin and anise anymore. We just have justice, mercy, and faith. Hallelujah, bless God. Okay? We don't have to do this. So I keep going. Okay? But he didn't stop there, because I think he would have concluded that we would have done that. So he said, you clean the outside of the cup, but inside the cup is filthy dirt. But he didn't stop there, did he? The reason he didn't stop there because he thought maybe people said, well, we just clean the inside of the cup, we don't clean the outside anymore. And so he went on, didn't he? And he said, clean the inside of the cup first, and then the outside will be clean also. Really? It's not, in other words, he didn't say, clean the inside or clean the outside, dude. It's either the Torah or it's your Jesus. Okay? He said one before the other. And then the whole thing will be clean, being a representation of his cup, not our cup. Then he goes on to say the difference between form and function. This is very important. I won't belabor it in the Greek Hebrew thinking process. But halakha is form. In other words, what do things look like? What did the tablets look like with the instructions scrawled on them? When he says do this, this is something you can see. You can see the form of it when you do it. Or from an agadic point of view, it's the function. What's the purpose of this? Agadic is function, halakhic is form. And so the bottom line is, it's not choose one or the other. If you're an engineer here, and you don't have to admit it, if you're an engineer here, then you know that the form is supposed to match the function. That's the whole purpose of designing things and then in getting structural engineers to put them together so people can see it. The form is supposed to match the function. Unfortunately, we live in a country where form became more important than function. In other words, what the thing looked like, how pretty it was, how glittery it was, how large or small, how shiny, particularly cars, was more important than their actual function. And I'm just, without going into a whole multitude of examples, I'm just going to ask you if you've ever thought to yourself about any particular thing in your life in which you said this to yourself. Who designed that? Yeah. I know some of you ladies have thought, you know, if a woman designed this kitchen, instead of some, you know what I'm talking about, okay? There's been lots of things in your life, especially my very first house. I said I wanted to do something down good. I remember my very first house, the doorknob needed to be replaced. And I walked up to that doorknob and I said, how do you take that doorknob off? And I looked around that doorknob, looked over here, and there was a screw. back around the corner in here of that doorknob. And I went and there wasn't a dang screwdriver on the planet that would get behind that doorknob. And you know what I said to myself? Who in the world designed this? Who put a screw back here that you can't get a screwdriver to open the thing? I'll be driving down the road with my cell phone. Pretend this is my cell phone. I got this cell phone in my hand. I'm driving down the road. Quite frankly, my friends, not that I don't love all of you. Some not so much. But there's only one reason why I have a phone, because my Carol's in it. My wife's in there. That's the only reason I carry it. I know my Carol. She's right in there. And pretty soon that thing's going to go, and I'm going to talk to my Carol. She's going to be right in there. I don't care to talk to anybody else. If I have to, I will. But she's in there. That's the reason I carry it. So inevitably in the past, that phone will be sitting there in my car, and that phone will ring, and I'll go to grab it in the very natural place you put your fingers to grab that, turn it off. And twice in my life, I've opened up that window, and I've tossed that phone out on the highway, and I've pulled over the side just watching for a semi to crush that thing to a gazillion pieces. Because I'm thinking, who in the world would design a phone that the natural place you would put your fingers to pick it up would turn the thing off? Who in the world would design such a thing? Have you ever been working on your laptop and you're typing away and the whole thing just blanks out? The whole thing just blanks out away and you go, who in the world would design a laptop in which you could accidentally make the whole thing disappear? What are these people thinking that designed this? That the form doesn't match the function. Because if I was designing a laptop, in order for the whole thing to accidentally disappear, you would have to put one toe here, one toe there, put your elbow here, put this finger over here, put this one over here, and you have to honk. Honk, honk, honk. The chances of that happening accidentally are pretty remote. And I don't know, that's the way I would design it. How about you? I mean, come on. Don't do something accidentally. And so the form has to match the function. Last one. This is the most important one. So I don't want to keep you all here all night. From a halakhic point of view, the reason why this is the most important is because this is definitely something that everybody in the world sees every day, as long as from the first human to the last human, every one of us were once young. Nothing we can escape. We were all young once. We all went through this process, and not only were we young once, but many of us in this room have raised other children. We've watched them go through the process, and there may be a few people who have raised a couple. Maybe some grandchildren do. Okay, I'm sorry. But you know what I mean? You've watched maybe several generations grow up from a baby to a youth to an adult, over and over and over. So it's something that God shows us over and over, billions of times. Okay, within a week. This happens billions of times across the world. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but this happens all the time. And so what am I trying to say? From a negatic point of view, it's represented by the baby relationship. Halakhic is a youth and adult. Let me demonstrate for you. Ladies, when you have that baby in your hand, that newborn baby that's only about a month old, and you're cradling that baby in your arms, and you're breastfeeding, and you're goo-goo and gaga, and you're smelling the hair, and you're pinching and loving and slurping and everything on that baby, do you turn to that baby at 1 month old and you say, now, on Saturday nights, you can stay out till 11. That's my rule. All the other weeks, you have to be home by 8. And I'm going to be very strict about that. Is that what you do? You pile a bunch of rules on the baby? Why is this important? Acts chapter 15. No. What are you doing those first months of that child? You're establishing a relationship. You're getting the baby to trust you, and you trust the baby that doesn't go, okay? You're establishing a relationship with that child. So you do that first. So here's the conundrum that the more mature disciples are having. Acts chapter 15. We got all these baby Gentiles coming in, and we have these Jewish believers coming down from Jerusalem telling them that they have, in order to be saved, they have to believe in Jesus and keep the commandments. They have to be circumcised. So they got these older, more mature people coming down from Jerusalem telling them that in order to be saved, you have to believe in Him, but you have to keep all these commandments and be circumcised. And that's never been true. That's never been true from day one. Nobody ever got saved by keeping commandments and being circumcised. That's not how you get saved biblically. It's how you get saved from an orthodox point of view, but that's not how you get saved biblically. As a matter of fact, he goes on to say, our fathers couldn't get saved that way. And they walked with Moses. They were right there with him, and they couldn't be delivered that way. Makes you think these baby Gentiles can be saved that way if even our fathers couldn't do that. So what are we going to do? We're going to give him these 4 things to do to what? Establish a relationship with them first, so we can fellowship and they can begin to trust her, and they trust us so they can learn all these other things in the synagogue when they learn of Moses and the synagogue. So they gave him 4 simple things to do in order for them to sit, fellowship, and have a relationship together. It's totally insane to conclude that that is to be the only 4 things that Gentiles have to do. So it's okay to murder and rape and pillage and commit adultery as long as you don't strangle anybody in the process. It's just total religious nonsense. And I'm just going to say it like it is because I'm tired of beating around the bush. Okay? The reality is these things are revealed in the natural things of creation. At first, we do this with new believers all the time. We establish a relationship with them first. We get them to trust us and so forth, just like you do a baby. And then later on, once the baby's established a relationship, then the baby starts crawling on the floor. Crawling on the rug. You know what it's like. They're on their hands and knees. They're crawling around. They're eating everything in sight. Matted hair and old bologna sandwiches and jelly matted together. Stuff. They're like Christians. We can eat anything now. And they get close to the edge, just about to teeter over to plunge to their death, and the parents come over and go, no. They put a little fence up, if you will, right? Some people literally put a fence up at the top of the stairs, a little folding thing, so forth. And because the rabbis, you know what I'm talking about. And so they say, no, you can't do that. Now, is that because I hate the baby and I want to put a lot of burdens on it? No, it's because I what? I love the child. And the child's going to want to do things that it's not ready to do yet. No. You don't do those things. Now you're going to start giving the babies rules, but you don't do that at the first when you're trying to establish a relationship. And I'm going to suggest to you that yes, we live in the world where sometimes we don't have opportunities to establish relationships with a lot of people, but that is the way it's designed. A lot of us get negative reactions because we toss people 400-pound boulders right off the bat. And what does it do? It just crushes them on the floor. Instead of just tossing them little pebbles one at a time until next thing you know they're holding 400 pounds and they didn't even know it. That's the way we should do things and so forth. Because it's laying a bunch of rules on people. That's what happens when we get overzealous about things like the baby crawling on the floor and wants to go immediately toward the stairs and venture out and see what the world's like. When that relationship needs to be established first. So the bottom line of all this, even though there's a lot of other things to do, to talk about, relating the fact that this is all revealed in halakha being the male and agadah being the female. The male being on the left, the female being on the right. There's a whole background to that as well to show how the two were designed to be one in order to give a full witness of God upon this earth. It's what we say and what we do.